Begin recording. And we'll call the meeting to order at 4:31. Patricia, are you ready? Are you good with starting? Okay, all right. Well, welcome everyone. The first thing that I want to do is accept the agenda, and then we'll move to welcome our new members. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Barbara.
Second.
And thanks, Patricia. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. All right. Well, I thought that we might start off with introductions since we do have new members. And the way that we began actually this committee was by introducing ourselves and the different perspectives that we bring to this group as kind of a way of getting to know each other. And so, so the easiest way I think to do that on Zoom is to do what I have heard called popcorn, which actually means that one person starts, and then when that person is finished, they pass it along to the next person who then does the same. And so I'll start. I'm Connie Manis. I chair this committee. I actually came onto this committee because the Chamber of Commerce was looking for a volunteer to represent them. And I, in my professional role working at the Kent Land Trust and also as a consultant who owns my own business, I'm a member of the Chamber. So that's kind of how I got here. My perspective in town is of a resident who's raised a family here. I have 3 sons who came up through Kent Center School. As I said, work at the Kent Land Trust, so I'm a conservation kind of minded person, kind of following along those lines. I also chair the Conservation Commission in town. So those are some various perspectives. And I live in South Kent, and I am going to pass the floor to Patricia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia Orris. I have been a resident of Kent for 22 years. 15 of those years was as a weekender and 6 or 7 as a full-time resident. My professional background is in branding and strategic communications and design. I volunteered for this committee because it seemed like an important one, and I thought I could bring a professional communicator's perspective to our work, because I thought communicating to the public, both in the gathering of information and then in the delivery of information, that would be an important contribution I could make. And now I toss the introductions to Glenn.
Thank you, Patricia. Hello, everybody. I'm Glenn Sanchez. I live here at the Marwood School. I've been at Marwood for 32 years. I've been living up here when Marwood moved in 1995. So I've been here for 27 years. My kids both went to Kent Center School. They went to Marwood as well. And my wife runs the Kent Memorial Library. And this is the very first time that I've been a selectman for the town of Kent, and enjoying it immensely. And then the work of this ARPA group is super important. I mean, I want to get involved with this and work with you all and make this work for the town. So thank you all for being here. And I will pass. I'll pass it over to Joe.
Yes. Hello, everybody, especially new members, Craig and Ruth. Craig, I know through town, local RTC meetings. Anyway, I just want to say that I'm thrilled that things are back on track, and that I myself, I've lived here in Kent now for probably about 23 years. I love it here. I volunteered to work on this committee because I like to get involved with community matters and so forth. And I am really, really getting into this, into what the work that we're doing. And I enjoy these meetings, and I look forward to them, actually. And yeah, and so I'm just happy to get back into to things and to continue doing our work. And I'll pass this along to Barbara next.
Okay, thank you. I'm Barbara Herbst. I am the town treasurer for the town of Kent. I've been in this position since 2009. And I agree with Joe's sentiments. I'm really excited and thrilled that our ARPA committee is getting back on track, and we just got to move forward. Basically, I'm in charge of the reporting and compliance piece. There's quite a bit of reporting that has to go back on these funds, back to the federal government, because these are federal funds that have been allocated to the different states and municipalities. And I will pass the floor to Craig Bibb.
See, I've been a Kent resident for, this will be my 28th year in 2022. Full-time since 2018, but there were bouts of full-time back in prior years also. I came to as Joe brought me to the committee through meeting through the Kent RTC. I think it's an interesting challenge, and I just want to help out however I can. My professional background is essentially all finance. I was on Wall Street for 35 years, analyst, portfolio manager, hedge fund manager, entrepreneur. I'm semi-retired now, but doing some advisory work at the same time. I'll help out however I can. I'll pass it off to Ruth.
Hi, thank you very much. I am Ruth Epstein. I have been here in Kent. We have been here 50 years. I'd like to say I came when I was 6, but that would not be true. We've been here. We've raised our children here. I was first selectman for 4 years back in the early 2000s. And I am a reporter with the Republican American newspaper, which I've done for many, many years. I think I'm bringing a perspective of not only experience in the municipal realm, but also as a journalist, I'm covering loads of towns and seeing what other towns are doing via the ARPA funds. And I've gotten some interesting perspectives, and I think we could all learn from each other, which is networking is really very important. So, and I thank you for allowing me to serve. Back to you, Connie.
Great, thank you. Thanks, I really appreciate that. And so I know it takes some time to do those kinds of round robins, but it's really helpful that we all know each other in these ways, and we'll continue to build the relationship. Just also by way of introduction for Ruth, you and Craig, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we've done thus far, in case you haven't had a chance to review each and every one of our Zoom recordings or minutes. The approach that our committee, and I guess for you too, Glenn, the approach that our committee has taken in this work is to, well, actually, let me back up one step farther, which was I did want to review our charge. And we are, as a subcommittee, an assessment committee. It is not our job to actually allocate the funding that the town has received from the federal government, but more so to take a look at the community and to make an assessment of what our community needs, what the impact of the pandemic was and continues to be on our community, and make some recommendations based on that assessment, make a report out and some recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance in their decision-making about the final allocation of funding. So our approach to how we are doing that has been, and Ruth, I'm glad that you mentioned that, you know, in your work as a reporter that you've come across lots of information about how other towns have done this. We have been conducting what I refer to as an environmental scan, a little bit of a term of art, but you know, just keeping track of what other towns, particularly towns nearby us who seem similarly situated, are doing with their funding and with their process of making an assessment. And so Joe has been really helpful in collating some of that information. We continue to add to it. So that'll be helpful to have your perspective on that, Ruth. We decided to model the town of Sharon's approach, which was to take a survey of their community. And so, and Sharon was very generous in basically saying to us, you know, copy us, you know, take our survey questions if you like them, use the exact process that we've been using. And so we did use their survey as a model. We tweaked it a little bit. And, you know, we landed with what you've seen, for better or for worse. I understand that there are some, you know, people that didn't like it very much, but it I think has done a basic job. We also planned to elaborate on the data that we collected through that survey by conducting focus groups. So, you know, we know that focus groups gather qualitative data to kind of round out what might be suggested by data that is more quantitative, as has been collected in our survey. So we're planning focus groups, and we envision a full report that would be shared with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, but we've also spoken about having a public meeting so that we could share our report out with the community at large. So we're now in the planning stage. You know, the survey has been out for some time, and we're in the planning stage for our focus groups, which originally were set for the end of January on the 29th, but it looks like we'll probably push those back to the first weekend in February. And we were initially very hopeful in the fall of having in-person focus groups. Those are, you know, that would be better, but clearly is not the way to go in the current state of what's going on all over the place with the pandemic. So that's where we're at. You know, if there are any burning questions right now, let's do them. We've also really tried to limit these meetings to like an hour and 15 minutes at the most. And that is the trade-off for meeting pretty much every week. So, you know, again, it's my hope to keep those really short and not, you know, keep the meetings pretty short and not go, you know, 2 or even more than 2 hours.
We talk about the survey for just a second, so I can get caught up.
Sure.
Okay, so it's it makes sense that we're pushing it back to the first weekend in February. We've only 5% of the town has responded to it, and then if you look at the demographics of who responded, it's, you know, it's not as representative as we would want. I think it's 44%, 65%, 65 plus. How are we getting, like, attracting people to fill out the survey, and what can we do more of?
All right, so Craig, I think actually I am going to push that back on the agenda, just
Okay.
a couple of items, just because let's get the minutes and all of that business out, and then, you know, we've actually got the survey on the agenda, but those are legitimate questions that bear some discussion. So let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is to approve the minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is the minutes are the minutes from December 15th. Thank you, Patricia, for doing those up. Has everyone had a chance to review? And are there any amendments needed to the minutes?
Reviewed them
I
both.
move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor from Patricia, then to Barbara, is to accept those minutes. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Ruth, you're on mute.
I am abstaining since I wasn't there.
Okay, Patricia, if you would just note that abstention, and this may surprise you when the Conservation Commission has checked Robert's rules. It's actually permissible to vote on minutes and the meeting when you weren't present, but I certainly understand abstaining if you weren't there and can't verify that, the minutes accurately reflect what happened. So your choice, and either way the motion carries. So we're going to move on to the minutes of January 5th, 2022. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are any amendments needed? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second,
Barbara, a second. Thanks, Patricia. All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Yes.
Thanks. And the motion carries. Thanks. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public comment. We do have Lynn Worthington here as a member of the public. Lynn, do you want to make a comment?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, great. So moving into old business, let's talk about that survey. We did, it's true that, it's not the entire town by any means. We're doing much better than the town of Sharon did in terms of the survey response, but we're lower than the response rate for the recent POCD survey. So one question would be how we're going to boost participation in the survey. Initially, I think we thought we would only keep it open until January 15th, but at last week's meeting, there was mention that we'd continue to keep it open, straight up through the focus group, if that meant that we'd have, better participation. I don't know, Joe, you posted in public places, right? So we did that. It's been in the town's newsletter.
Yes.
It's up on the website. We've asked all of the town boards and commissions to share it among their commissions and to encourage people to take it. I've specifically asked when talking to reporters about reporting on this committee that they include the link to the survey and suggest that people take it. And I've shared it on my personal social media when I've seen it shared on the town account and the Town of Kent, Connecticut community Facebook page. And we mailed a postcard to every single person in town.
Except me.
That. So I'm not really sure how much more we can do, although we can continue to share it socially and we can continue to ask Jean to put it in her newsletter so that people keep seeing it. Any other thoughts on that? Joe?
Yeah, okay. Sharon also did not, well, Sharon had much less of a response than what Kent had. But in any case, they extended the time frame to for more responses, and this was, I would say, maybe a month or so ago. And since then, they have not really gotten. In fact, I think they said, or I heard that they have not gotten any more responses. So, for us to extend, say like another month or something like that. I think probably we're going to get the same reaction as what they have, where we're not going to get maybe one or two more responses. So, maybe we can post it again on the Kent Community Facebook page. But I think a lot of people around are aware that that there's a survey going on. I know it was mentioned in the Republican American about the survey, and it's, I don't know how much more reaction we're going to get. We can try it, I suppose, but maybe we should start looking at the results that we have now and kind of like building like a foundation with what we have, with the material that we have now, maybe discuss it and see where it goes. That's my opinion or my comments.
Other thoughts?
Well, I mean, if we don't do something incremental to publicize it, then we will not have additional responses. And it's one of the core issues in a town that doesn't have a newspaper. And we're never going to have one going forward, but I don't think we're charged with figuring out a solution for how do we alert people in our town of something that's of importance and they should respond to. Lawn sign, like I don't know. And from what Joe's talking about, I've never looked at the Waterbury Republican. I don't use Facebook. That means you're reaching out. I've never gotten something from the town of Kent other than email. I didn't get a postcard saying I should complete the survey. So I don't know how you reach people in this age.
Could I answer that? Yeah. Okay. Now here's a thought. How about if once we kind of like look over our survey and and get information and comments and so forth with that, how about if we put together a presentation, and then do a town meeting of some sort to kind of advertise it, and then do a town meeting so the community could hear what the results were and add their comments and thoughts. In addition to that, for people such as Craig that don't get the newspaper and are not active on social media.
Yeah, I think you're right, Joe. I mean, one other thing I was going to say is that you probably heard from Barbara as she was describing the survey responses last week that, and may have seen yourself, that people responded primarily in a large group right after we published it, right? So there was like a spike, which is probably like, that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the people who are, really want to tell us what they think through this survey.
So when it was published on,
hold on a moment.
where was it
please.
published? What was the initial publication that caused that response?
I have to look back. In November, the very beginning, tail end of November, beginning of December. So, and you can see that on the, if you go into the survey yourself, you can see when people responded, and particularly if you click on the trends button in the middle of, there's a horizontal. So, I guess, which is all just to say that, I think that we've grabbed the people who really, really wanted to tell us what they thought. We kind of have already come to terms with the fact that we never really expected to get every single person in town to respond. We also were not using the survey as like an exhaustive way to vet each and every person who might have been damaged by COVID, right? So it was not serving as an application in any means, by any means. So I think that we've gathered some data. I hope that we do get more people. I don't think we should stop trying to get more people to fill out the survey, but I don't think that we should unnecessarily delay our process in the hopes that we're somehow going to get 1,000 people to fill out the survey, especially when the data that we have so far shows some trends that we might be able to, make some generalized conclusions about. So I guess I just want to caution us not to get too sidetracked on this, but tell everyone. And, you know, if you're not a social media user, tell everyone you meet. Make sure that they filled it out. In my family, we did. And I tell my neighbors too. And like I said, I shared it on my social, on my personal. So I think that's the best we can do so far. And as Joe was saying, you know, we plan a public meeting. So the public meeting is not a public meeting to try and get more people to fill out the survey, but it is a way for us to report out what we were hearing in the survey. And if there's something vastly different out there, we'll get a comment at that point.
So Glenn and Barbara, do you know how many people are on the town's email blast? Like
That I don't know.
I want to say it's less than 200, but I'm not
Oh, wow.
positive.
Really.
okay,
Since last week, when we discussed the survey, 5 additional responses have been received.
I
And
think that we can't, there's certainly a case of diminishing returns. The longer the survey is out there, the longer from launch, the fewer the responses. I think that Craig aside, we can do one more push on social media, the Kent community page, as Joe pointed out, and if others, you know, maybe Joe, you could put it on the RTC's Facebook page and try to get those people from that follow you. I can put it on the Democrat Town Committee Facebook page and try to get those people involved. We could do one more push, but I don't expect a ton more. It doesn't mean the information is not relevant, given the 170 responses we'll probably end up with. There also might be some tiring because the COPD survey was right before this survey, and then this survey, people might be thinking like, okay, I'm filling out all these surveys for what purpose? So there could be a little bit of that. I would say if we're going to extend the survey deadline, it should be to the end of January at most, and we keep going along with our work, analyzing the responses we have had and being able to extrapolate from that information that we think might be fairly universal. So that's how I feel about survey response and how to go forward. So if we all do one last social media push, and you know, personal push to friends and neighbors, maybe we'll get 10 or 20 more, but we're not going to get 100 more. So I think we're going to have to deal with those answers we have. As in terms of responses, 66.45% were people over 55. So when we invite people to the focus groups, I think we have to make a particular push to try and get some younger people in to talk to us, young families, young moms, people with children still at school age, maybe even young people who grew up here and would like to stay in the area, but are wondering what the future holds for them in such a rural community. I'm not sure, but we should try to target a few younger people. Also, that it was.
I'm sorry, Patricia, to interrupt.
That's okay.
In some ways, I think that is characteristic of our population of our town, though. So I also,
It is reflective.
you know, it's not to be too upset with that distribution if it's representative, but I don't disagree with what you're saying about, you know.
Since we're interrupting, Lynn pointed out that 1,000 people get the town newsletter. Apparently I'm not one of them, but when does the next town newsletter go out?
They're sporadic.
It just went out. It goes in the first week of the month.
The first week of the month of each. And do we know if there's a survey prompt in the newsletter?
It is. Barbara, go ahead.
So I just checked with Jean. There are 1,395 names in our constant contact list that we send the newsletter out to. The survey was sent out via that list already, and she's checking because she thinks it was more than once that it was sent out to that list.
I feel like
So-
I've been seeing it in margins on the newsletters, even when they're going out, just with the situational advisory. So I don't know that there's that much more that we can do. But I do
Okay,
want
so
to,
continuing on, the other
Yeah.
thing I noticed was that the great percentage of people who responded are just residents, taxpayers. Very few businesses, very few nonprofits. So those focus groups are going to be very important because I think it was only 15% of the survey responses were from people who owned or operated a business here in town. Or a nonprofit. So we really haven't heard from them sufficiently. The focus groups are going to be important to talk to them. And the last thing I noticed about the respondents, generally speaking, was absolutely no Scattercoke people responded to the survey. Now, I don't know how that is, but they do live in our town and they are a part of the community. And when I glanced over Barbara's new, the interim final and the final, I noticed that they mention Native American constituencies a few times. So I'm gonna throw this out there. Should we talk to the Scattercokes about this and how they were affected by COVID? And do we need to reach out to that community group? I'm just throwing it out there because we haven't heard from a single one of them.
Does anybody know how big that community is? I really don't know.
Could
Sorry.
I,
Very, very small, very small.
In the reservation, I mean, they're not actually even recognized Native
Well,
Americans. But the reservation is, people gather there, but the actual number of people that are in the tribe and live in the town is. I
Yeah,
believe,
sometimes I see huge groups there, but I don't know if they actually live there or they're visiting. So just a question because, I don't know whether we really consider them an integral part of our community.
Joe, did you have a comment?
yeah, with what Patricia was saying now, okay, they are a member of the community. We all know that. So reaching out to them, we have to, we can't go crazy to try to figure out a way to reach out to, to this segment, which I believe, according to the survey, was what, 1.4% of the population. Now, they do have an opportunity to participate through the survey. So as to how they can, how that can be told to them that they can participate in the survey, that's what we have to figure out. But again, we can't get really, sidetracked with trying to reach out with, a part of the community that's 1.4%. We can make, somewhat of an effort, but again, there's, large segments of the community that have responded to the survey. And my feeling is that we have some data and that I think we can start formulating some kind of a plan with recommendations with some of the data which we have received. I mean, I've looked over all the information and I can see you know, who supports and who strongly supports what segments of the community are that we have, what percentage. So again, that's my thoughts.
Does
Yeah, I was just
anybody
throwing
in
it out there. I didn't
Yeah,
have a
Does
position on
anybody in
it.
the room have a personal connection? I have an email connection, and so I can make a very quick outreach, and that's not going to be hard. And so I think that that's, you know, not going crazy, but also reasonable, you know, in light of
That would be
Patricia's
great.
comments. Um,
Yeah, because
and-
I
and
know
I
that
do-
they suffered disproportionately from COVID when in the first rounds of COVID. So just a thought, but I think if you reach out, Connie, that's good enough. And we've tried anyway.
Kind of, you're gonna send it, you have an email, you have an email list that you can
I
use?
have I have one contact among the Scattercooks, and so I can
Oh, the
just,
Shagatuk, go over back to the Indians.
you know, do the people in your community know that there's a survey on? Here's the link. Please do take it if you're interested. And so let's see what happens, right? You know, I guess that I think that we should talk about the survey responses a little bit, you know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but I think that we should be thinking about it in the context of our focus group planning, as Patricia has suggested. So in other words, if our focus groups are meant to amplify, you know, the data that we're getting in our survey, then what we should be thinking about is, what can we ask certain groups of people, small groups of people, what can we ask them about to learn a little bit more about what we're seeing in the survey, and also what we're not seeing in the survey, right? So, you know, so I just kind of ask you to put a lens like that on this discussion. I made my own notes, you probably did too, having reviewed the surveys. The items in question 6 that received the most support so far, and you know, we may get more responses, our people are highly favorable of assisting residents to pay their bills impacted by COVID, and also supporting the Kent Volunteer Fire Department. And then like the least support items, and no item got no support at all. And it's not really dramatic. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I'm just not sure how sure we can be relying on any of the distribution of support in question 6. But, you know, the lowest one of all was, people don't seem to think we should use it for deep cleaning of public areas. Only, you know, that only got 34% of the people either highly or a little bit supported it. And then also translating things was also not a favorite. Purchasing basic technological equipment for residents was not a favorite. Free Wi-Fi on Main Street was not a favorite, nor were bonus payments to individuals that worked through the pandemic, although some of the comments that we received seemed to kind of trend the other way. I also thought it was really interesting on question 7 that not that many people reported being personally affected in the monetary ways that we were suggesting that they might have. Although, you know, there are certainly, you know, people among the respondents that did have, you know, a monetary impact. But it was really interesting to see a lot of people asking or selecting no to those options in question 7. And I thought that the comments, although, you know, it takes time to go through them, were really helpful in understanding a little bit more about where people were coming from and where they were impacted. So I put that out there as my own, you know, some of my own takeaways from this. What might the rest of you have been noticing?
Well, I noticed that of the top 3 vote getters, the top 2 was assisting residents who are having difficulties paying their bills, et cetera, because of COVID losses. And assisting businesses that lost revenue because of that. And the fire department was the #1 vote getter, I believe. But given the 2, I have a feeling that people are telling us they want this money to go directly to the people or the businesses that experienced loss, more than they want it to go to fund any particular project or initiative. It seemed like they were telling us, give the money to people or small business owners who really need it. And I get that because the questions that were geared towards helping those in need were the most popular. I think that says something interesting about our town, is that we're a town of generous people that want to help people who need it. But I also think everything else sort of lumped in this middle category. You know, people want to see the parks improve. That was about 63. If you add up the strongly support and regular support. So of the ones that were project or initiative oriented, the improvement of parks and recreational facilities was the one that came best. But far and away, the volunteer fire department was, I think everyone perceives that as important to the town, as essential, as primary, and they want to see it funded properly. So those were my thoughts on the thing. Also, the 83% want to see a follow-up report. So I think it's important that we do a written report of our findings, our recommendations, and somehow we have to divvy up the work for how we're going to compile and write that. And then how are we going to get it back to all the people? Because all of them want to see it. So those were my comments.
Yeah, I think you guys are leaving out because it jumped off the page at me. So if you look at extremely, the highest category, #1 of what I extremely want, it's broadband and the firehouse. We're actually statistically insignificant. They're basically the same at 45%. And so, those are both. I don't know what the fire department needs, but like clearly, that's our #1 priority. At least the residents who filled the survey is #1 priority. And broadband is right up there. So
I don't remember seeing that. That's funny. It didn't stick out the broadband to me.
When I'm looking at the ones that are the most respondents, I add strongly support and support. And I think with broadband, it had some support in one category, but if you add the 2 together, it wasn't close to the fire department.
The fire department was 75% for the first 2, and then broadband was 60, but they were both 45% were extremely important.
Yeah, so it may be that the people who care about that an awful lot. That's an interesting observation.
But I think like if you're trying to narrow down the things to work on, it's kind of you throw out the bottom performers and you look at the top performers, and we can weight the extremely. So it's important. I mean, you can't say broadband's not important if it's extremely important to 45% of the respondents.
Okay, so go on. Sorry.
Go on. So I think
don't
that, should be something we should be focused on. And fire is, so clearly a priority that we, I think we're almost moved to start looking at what they need.
Joe.
Yeah, oh yeah, the other day I sat down and I looked at all the survey results, and at first I said, throughout this whole process, it was mentioned, we will go with Survey Monkey and so forth. And my way of thinking was that, well, what is the difference? One survey, as opposed to another. Well, anyway, they give you the numbers of breaking down everything in discrete numbers. And I added up the support and strongly support, and the numbers tell the whole story. For example, for the top four things that the people that responded want to see this money spent on were the Kent Volunteer Fire Department support. That came out with 75.8%. People struggling to pay bills came out with 73.2%. Support for nonprofits because of their increased workload, 69.9%. Local businesses that were closed and local businesses that had to purchase PPE equipment, 68.8% and 67.5%. High-speed internet, home and business, 60.9%. Mental health crisis intervention, 59.8%. And then kind of a tie between recreational, 57%, and improved technology in town hall, 57.9%. And then the rest were not as, they didn't rank as high, of course. So anyhow, going with that information, we kind of have a guidepost as to where people are interested in seeing these ARPA funds spent. But my feeling is that I don't think we're near getting ready to prepare a final report yet, because of for the amount of money that's being given to Kent. I think there's probably more work to do as far as what else. I mean, that the ARPA funds could be spent on.
Can I ask, since our survey was modeled in large part on Sharon's, I don't know if we know, do we have a sense of how that went for Sharon in terms of where monies could be spent? Do we have a sense of any town, actually, those who either had a survey or those who have already spent monies? Do we have a sense of where other towns are going, and our survey results, are they in line with others? I'd love to know that.
Then I don't know how the Sharon survey turned out, and you might be able to find it if you went on their town page, because they created a web page.
I can ask Jill to send me, I'm sure Jill has a synopsis of it. So I'll ask her if she'll send it to me for the next meeting.
That'd be great. And then meanwhile, I would encourage you to review the environmental scan that we have up in the drive, which will just kind of shortcut a discussion that we might get sidetracked into right now about what other towns are doing, because we do have quite a bit of information about that tabulated. And so I'd almost rather move us into, thinking about the focus groups, especially since, and we should probably talk about this and decide it tonight, if we're going to try and do the focus groups on Facebook, then we have a lot of work to do, because we have to invite people to them and make sure that they can come. And then we have to have questions ready for them. So and to me, the harder part is, making sure that we have people that we want to reach out to, and that we do reach out to them, and that we've secured their participation. The focus group isn't going to do us any good if no one's coming. So I don't know what you all think. I think in order to put this together for the first weekend in February, that we are going to have to meet weekly. I hope that's okay with you. Even then, it seems like a bit of a technical, although I think we could probably do it if we hustle and are really efficient with our time. What do you think?
Now, at the last meeting, it was mentioned how all the focus groups are going to be done on Zoom. So how will this be set up now if, okay, the facilitator, note taker, whatever. I mean, how is that going to go for, in other words, how are you going to coordinate all this? Is there a plan to coordinate it?
Tricia, I would ask you to back me up here. I mean, I saw, Joe, I see it happening like this. I mean, you can have a discussion on Zoom. There's no reason that you couldn't. We just thought that it would, initially, when things looked better, it seemed like it would be better to be in person, because the feeling and the sharing is, there's just less of a barrier between the people who are having a conversation. But if things are small enough, you can have a conversation, and it would be up to the moderator to encourage that conversation, and it would be up to the note taker to take notes while it was happening. And I think that might be the preference of the people participating in the focus group. We might not want to, I don't know that we'd want to record those meetings, in other words. I think that we want to encourage open sharing.
I think that would intimidate a free conversation.
Yeah.
But are you going to be able to do this all in one day, or, in one day, have all these Zoom meetings going on?
Well, we intended to do in-person ones all in
Right.
one day, 3 by one group and 3 by another. So I think we can still do that, maybe even easier via Zoom. The maximum 90 minutes long, each one. So that all told would be 5 hours. It's a full day of work, sure, but we thought we wanted to get it done that way rather than spurse them out over several weekends. Better to give up one weekend day than several. So are we all still in agreement about doing them all in one day?
I don't know.
I think we should shoot for that, unless we find out that people can't be there, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing too, is like, we are assuming that all of our guests are, not only going to want to do this, but they are all going to be available exactly when we want them to be. And I think we may find, as we set out, that, maybe restaurant owners don't want to come to a Zoom meeting at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday night. So, we really may need to shift gears and play with that a little bit as we find out more.
Well, that brings me to the important issue about the focus groups, which is we have to invite people to participate. We have a few people that have volunteered. I don't know which category they come in, but we should decide today, if we can, who is going to invite what groups of people. Connie, if you're on the chamber, maybe you could get, you could be responsible for getting the business owners to participate. We're not making progress on pulling together our focus groups. So we're talking about them, but we have no idea who actually is going to show up for them. So I think we have to start inviting people like right away.
So February 5th. I mean, the list of names that we have so far, and there is a working document in our working group drive that lists 5 residents who volunteered back when there was a mention of a public call to be part of a focus group that was for residents. And so those people are listed. They have not been contacted to say, you know, oh, you expressed interest. We've scheduled the focus group for this time. Can you come? But that's the furthest group. That's the group that we're furthest on. As far as retail and restaurants, we have a store owner and a, well, I'll just say it because, you know, Kent's small. And so we have Kent Falls Brewing because we only have one brewery in town. But both of those, you know, both of those have been volunteers that wanted to be in the retail and restaurants. I would suspect that we'd get several others who might be willing, especially restaurants, because it seems like they would have been most likely, I don't know, I mean, but they would have been likely to close. So, you know, there's a list of restaurants that are in Kent, and we can outreach, you know, to all of them. Just takes time. As far as nonprofits go, the Housatonic Valley Association had responded to us with a letter, as well as, you know, volunteering to participate. So did the chamber itself. There are different nonprofits that are listed on the chamber's website that we can reach out to. And then when I was thinking about service providers and social services, I started to get confused because I started to wonder whether folks like the pharmacy and our doctors were more properly in like the social services category. And if service providers, you know, could be eaten up with, you know, having our different business people like hair salon, banks, payrollees, exercise studio, those kinds of service providers. So that's on that.
Well, social services, I thought was not business owners. We talked about asking Leah Polaro to, if she would be able to pull together a group of her clients that we could talk to about that. So I thought social services was not so much healthcare workers as it was people that avail themselves of the food bank, of the heating assistance program, of, you know, those various things. So that's what I thought we were talking about with social services. I'm not sure what everyone else thought.
And I just say, those are all very confidential. The people who
Right.
who come to.
So you think they wouldn't be interested?
No, I wouldn't even ask. I mean, it's a very personal thing, and
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, you know,
I mean,
maybe
you
that
need
is
social service people who provide those services. Some of the counselors in town. Unfortunately, Leah is leaving, so I don't know, you know, where we stand with that, but we have mental health people in town, counselors, those sorts of people would be very good to talk to, but as far as clients go, you couldn't ask them.
okay. So then Judy Sheridan
Right.
is the interim. Maybe we could reach out to her. Ruth, would you be able to put together a list of people that you would think would be good people to participate in that social services focus group, the providers of social services? Could you put that list together?
I can give you some names. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And then
I
we
think
can,
I would add to, like, in case it's not obvious, you know, or one of the people that you would have put in there, Ruth, I would add the Housatonic Youth Services Bureau.
Mhm. Oh, there are loads of, I mean,
Yeah, I
well,
think the
then you're
others
going
might
out,
be-
then you're going outside of Kent. So is that all right? I mean, you,
Well, I'm picking up from the surveys that people are, they're having a lot of mental health and anxiety type needs, and felt that our survey did not do a very good job of trying to piece that out or quantify it in any way. And I don't really know how you would, but I think that that is an area where we need to learn more. And
Mhm.
so I think mental health services generally would be something that would be really good to explore in the context of a focus group. And if there's another way of getting a perspective on our youth, then you know, we don't need to go Housatonic Youth Services Bureau, but I'm just wondering, like, who knows about the mental health needs of school-age children in our
Mhm.
community?
I think
Joe and
somebody
then
from
Barbara.
our elementary school, like the principal, would be a good person to have
right,
to
yeah,
represent that. And I
school
also,
psychologists, yeah.
I also think that maybe some of the ecumenical providers in town would be good to have, because they get an insight into their congregations that we might not get otherwise.
that's a
There's
very good suggestion.
I never thought that the social service focus group was going to be made up of people that utilize the social services. I always thought it would be the providers that provide the social services component.
So just before I lose this thought, and then Joe, I think maybe what might be helpful is for us to start to build out these lists in the working document on the Google Drive. And so, you know, if it comes up, if you run into colleagues that you think would be great and you want to talk about the focus groups, that's fine. Let's leave like the formal invitation, you know, to next week, but let's try to build out these lists and realize that, you know, in order to get 8 to 10 people, we are going to have to invite more than 8 to 10 people. So we can be over inclusive, but, you know, we ought to think about like whose voice is really important to be heard, and let's see if we can get a you know, some decent lists together for all of these different groups. Joe.
Yeah, I was going to suggest Greenwood Counseling for mental health services, because actually I had heard that that they are going to be requesting from each of the towns in the Northwest I don't know what it's called, council or whatever, a certain amount, you know, to from ARPA funds.
Oh, the cog towns, you mean?
They did put a
No.
proposal into COG, and COG has released it. And it's still in the concept stage, but it has a little bit closer alignment to do with community outreach for the opioid crisis.
Is there a Northwest Council of Northwest Council of Governments or something like that?
Yes,
That's COG. That's what
Okay.
Barbara's talking about.
Yeah,
COG.
yeah. That's where I had heard that coming from.
but that proposal is very sort of specific to deal with the opioid crisis.
Did everybody get a phone call from the woman in, I think it's Cornwall, who's concerned about COGS over directing the different ARPA committees? I guess I was the only one. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't even ask her what they were pushing. I said it's not really part of what we're doing.
How long
But,
ago was that?
Presumably that was it.
I thought Scott Trabuco's letter, I thought the second proposal he did was they're working on a nonprofit after school program. I thought that was very interesting. One, because I think our Parks and Rec department is having issues with their after-school program. And it seemed promising to me that the Board of Ed is thinking about creating a not-for-profit after-school program for children and parents in Kent. So I don't know, that one somehow
think-
when good.
Go ahead. No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were done.
Basically I am. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, Patricia.
It's okay.
I thought some of the comments were pretty interesting on the survey with people who would like to see certain things in Kent. I mean, we're finding out what people desire about Kent that is above and beyond what the ARPA funds can necessarily do, but it's still really interesting information. And so, you know, some of that dialogue about, well, you know, I don't know why this isn't already in our budget, or I think this is already within the role of this, or whatever, you know, is interesting. And we'll have to, you know, further discuss some of that. But I wanted to point out that, you know, that we are kind of operating with this narrow scope of what the funds can be applied to, but we're finding out a lot more about our community and our community's needs.
May I just ask, Connie, have you gotten any formal applications yet?
We haven't, because there is no formal application. So when people have written letters suggesting that there, you know, be money allocated, or even a specific money amount of money allocated, or even, you know, a detailed proposal. Actually, Barbara was very good at responding to them and saying, you know, we're in receipt of your letter, and just, you know, so you fully understand, the charge of the committee is to make an assessment and not to accept applications or allocate any funding. So no, we haven't got anything that we would consider a formal application, and we're not soliciting those.
Since I'm also trying to get caught up here, was there, did the committee issue a report in October 21? It looks like there's an annual report that will be.
So maybe, Barbara, you can just say a word about that. Like the reporting requirements for the
timeline.
town are requirements for us.
That timeline is the federal reporting requirements, and that's actually been pushed back. So we don't have to actually report anything now until I think the end of March. And at that time, it's a status report of, we've received our money, what have we done, where are we? That's all that is for.
I'd like to ask a question on that, is that I've been following what other municipalities have been doing with their ARPA funding and so forth. And there are a few towns that have allocated some of these funds already for certain needs. So are you aware of that, Barbara?
That has no bearing on what we're doing. It doesn't matter to us what the other towns are doing, or how they're allocating, or when they're allocating their funding. We have until December of 2024 to allocate this funding. And we have till December of 2026 to disperse this funding.
So what I'm saying is that these funds can be allocated, like, say, as of now.
They can, but not by our committee. Our committee's not allocating funds.
We're making recommendations.
Conceivably, a very emergent need could be communicated to us that might conceivably, theoretically, be decided by this committee, warranted us making a recommendation prior to coming to the full, you know, conclusion of our report. That has not happened yet. It's conceivable, and we would have to discuss it then.
I see.
Right? Does that make sense to everyone? Do you think what I'm saying is correct?
That makes
Yes,
And
Okay.
are we planning to work on this through December 24 or get enough information, make a recommendation?
I don't think any of us thought that we would still be meeting at this in December 2024.
Okay.
We have a much shorter timeline. And to that end, because we're bumping up on an hour and a quarter, so I do want to close the meeting, fairly soon. But I'm not sure that I was hearing a consensus, or maybe we can't decide tonight about, should the weekend of February 5th, Saturday, specifically be the date that we should be shooting for these focus groups, or do we need more time?
I think it is.
February 5th.
Yeah.
I'll vote for February 5th also.
But I think that's fine.
Okay.
It's a Saturday.
So given that, I would say that our next steps for our next meeting, and I have to remember to do something really quickly, but just finishing that thought, our next steps for our next meeting are to build out the list as we discussed in the drive for people that we think should be invited to go to the focus groups in the different categories, right? And continue to look at the survey information and think for yourselves about what you think each of these groups can tell us to amplify what we're learning from the surveys, and what we don't know yet, that would help us to make our assessment. Okay, so those would be the primary items for our next meeting, which I recommend be in a week. And then the thing that so I sent out 2 agendas, as you know, because I had a conversation with Darlene Brady about the nature of special meetings and regular meetings. And the deal with special meetings is you are not allowed to add anything at all to the agenda once the agenda goes out. Which this is sort of the same kind of thing, but you cannot have a category called new business on your agenda. You really cannot discuss any new business at all. So, I said to Darlene, well, then how would we make a special meeting a regular meeting? And, she said, well, in that case, what you would do is you would set a regular schedule of meetings. We could say weekly on Wednesdays. If we decided not to meet on one Wednesday, we would have to remember to cancel the meeting. Okay, so that would be, a little bit more of an administrative headache, but allowing us the freedom to entertain new business if there is new business to be discussed. And it takes a month for your special meeting for your regular meetings to be in full effect. So we would still have to have special meetings for the next 4 meetings, but after that, if we are still meeting, it could be a regular meeting. Does that make sense? And what do you think about that?
I mean, it's like you just told, that's the rules, right? So we need to follow the rules. That's
right. But should we move to a regular meeting schedule?
This because then we have more flexibility. Right, so should move to a regular meeting schedule.
Yeah, I'm sure that if we want flexibility in the agenda, we have to set it up as a regular meeting. So doesn't seem to be that much choice in it, because I don't see that this group is ever going to be one that sticks to an absolute agenda, because it's a moving target, responses and focus groups, and it's more qualitative than quantitative. So I don't think we could ever, stick to a firm agenda, unless the agenda is like so broad that it could include everything.
Any other thoughts?
Fine with me either way.
Ruth, I didn't hear, I'm not hearing you, I'm sorry.
I think it makes sense to do it on regular meetings, and then you can cancel if need be, but at least you have that opportunity to change your agenda if need be.
Okay, I'm going to take the steps necessary to move us to a regular meeting schedule. Our regular meetings will be on Wednesday of each week. Is there any reason to revisit 4:30 as a meeting time at the moment? It seems to have worked for us. I don't know if it's the best, but
That works for me. It's a great time.
Works for me.
okay. So regular meetings, Wednesday at 4:30. I'll do what I need to do to get that converted over. You won't see it for 4 weeks because we will still need to notice the meeting as a special meeting for the time being, and we'll be careful about our agendas. And then after that, we'll have a little bit more flexibility. So unless there is further business, I think it would be nice for somebody to make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thanks, Craig and Joe. I appreciate all of your time tonight and look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.